Hello, Biz Catalyst 360 and Northern Lights Publishing welcome you to RoundTable 360 with your host and moderator, Joseph Carabas. RoundTable 360 brings together people in the creative fields, dancers, thespians, poets, actors, musicians, authors, and others from across the globe in conversation about things that are relevant, irrelevant, serious, and fun. Today's conversation is Yeah, But You're an Idiot, recognizing authority and legitimacy in Rejections, and is led by children's book author and humorist Mark O'Brien. Today's guests include editor, publisher, and award-winning poet Clarabelle Murray Fields, scriptwriter, dramatist, and poet Kenneth Wein, mystery, thriller, and cozy author Donna Houston Murray, fiction fantasy author Rick DeRobertis, and a host of others. Stay with us and enjoy.
Thank you very much. I am, well, first of all, I'm happy to be here. And I am happy to be characterized as a author of children's books, among other things. The humorist part, I'm not quite as sure of, but as I encourage my wife all the time to take the point, so I will. So thank you, Joseph. I appreciate that. Yes, indeed. The topic is rejection. And I want to share some things about one particular work in the 20th century, which is Ulysses, James Joyce's novel Ulysses. But something else occurred to me, which is that somewhere around 2008, when the financial crisis was sort of kicking in, my business started to suffer. So I recognized that I needed to do something different from what I had been doing in the past. So I ended up getting, I guess it's called a CRM system. If anybody's interested, I do believe it was free, but it's called Insightly. And I decided that when I did that, and it's insightly.com, and I decided that I would try to see if I could scare up 10 prospects, 10 meaningful prospects. I scared up somewhere between 50 and 100, which, first of all, blew my mind. Secondly, changed my perspective. And one of the things that Insightly allows users to do is to track activity and to have an email address that you can put in the BCC line that will file every prospecting email you send out in Insightly, so you will know you've done that. And so I just decided that I was going to work that like a maniac. And what that taught me was that I was sending out so many prospecting feelers that even had I been inclined to take rejections personally, I wouldn't have had the time. And then I realized those things aren't personal at all, because none of those people who decided they didn't want to work with me knew me. So if they don't know me, how in the world can that be personal? So let that be sort of a stage setter. And then as Joseph put in some of his own social media promos for this show, the notion of power without authority and authority without legitimacy came to me by way of Political Science 101, which is the only political science course I ever took. But obviously that notion stuck with me. And so I think when we're doing creative work, maybe especially given this group, if we are rejected, I happen to think it's worth considering the source of that rejection. Who is it that's doing the rejection? What degree of legitimacy are we willing to grant that source? And depending on our response to that is that authoritative enough for us to even want to take that rejection personally? And I also think, given the wide berth, we need to allow for subjectivity. And I'm going to steal a point from Joseph. If people reject our work without giving us any reason, let alone any constructive feedback or input, what should we find that rejection to be worth? So what I wanted to share with you about Ulysses is that book was serialized. That novel was serialized from 1918 to 1920 in an American literary magazine called the Little Review. That serialization led to an obscenity trial, in which, to make a long story short, the book and James Joyce ultimately prevailed. It was first published in book form in 1922 by Sylvia Beach, the proprietor of the Shakespeare and Company bookstore in Paris. And then in 1933, Bennett Cerf decided to publish it with, and now Random House. And then in 1936, Ulysses was published in the United Kingdom. So between 1921, when the obscenity suit was initiated, and 1933, when Bennett Cerf prevailed at Random House in the United States, James Joyce never gave up. And I think it's fair to assume, although I didn't have the opportunity to ask him, I don't even think he took the obscenity suit personally, let alone the rejection of everyone to whom he may have sent the manuscript. So I think there's a lesson in there for all of us. And I want to cite Joseph because 9 days ago we had a sort of pre-call to this one, and Joseph said some very valuable things about evaluating rejection. Joseph, I hope I haven't mischaracterized that. And Donna actually said something fascinating about the idea that she accepts rejection well. I don't know if that was a gift from the beginning, Donna, or if that was learned behavior. But I would love to hear more about that. And with that, anyone who has any comments, questions, or anything they would like to share, as my friend Jonas and Goldson loves to say, the floor is open. Yeah, Rick, please.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I am not very prolific compared to everybody else on here. I began writing stories in the third grade, and then in high school and college, I wrote maybe about a dozen stories, and began working on a novel. Became a lawyer, and after many decades, I finished my novel. I'm still looking for a home. I was given some advice by a rather famous artist who has since ghosted me for saying that Biden was not going to be a socialist. I said that 4 years ago, that I should write stories based upon the characters in my novel to try to get those published. And so I began doing that. And I found the Rejections interesting. I did have one thing published in the anthology, The Rabbit Hole, where I met Joseph and thus got invited into this group, and I'm very happy about that. If I could just share with you a couple of things, that some of the comments on my stories being rejected make sense, and some don't. Because I write in a secondary world, I always send things first to Beneath Ceaseless Skies, which only wants secondary world. And the first story I wrote, they said, I enjoyed the dialogue and imagery, but I was curious for a stronger sense of the main character's goal and internal character arc. So while I liked the first part, I was disappointed that it was rejected, but I thought, well, you know something, I guess they are on there. I did have a story arc. I mean, something began, there was conflict, and there was an end, but I could have got more into the main character, and they didn't ask for a rewrite, so I did rewrite it, and began sending to other places. Another place then said, this is well written, but slow early pace, isn't really good for a short story. And then the second reader said, the text style is particularly strong and really sets the tone. Unfortunately, they didn't like the pace. And so I'm thinking, well, I certainly like the first part they're saying, but the second part, I'm not quite sure how to handle that, because I mention a forthcoming war on page 1. I mention, actually describe a battle of people being killed in page 7. And then the last third of the story, they're being chased by demonic, hounds, running for their lives. So I don't quite understand, the criticism for pace, but couldn't think of anything else to do but just to keep on submitting. And then the last rejection I got, and there were many more in between, I'm not bothering to mention, is the underlying idea is interesting, but there's too much head hopping going on. Now, wait a minute. I know what head and Beneath These Skies says it has to be strict, one person, third person, limited point of view. So I was very careful that everything in my story that I'm telling the reader is what the main character sees or hears. So I can't see how that criticism has any legitimacy whatsoever, because there's zero head hopping. And then the two readers from this last place said the dialogue is stilted, when the other people said the dialogue was good. And I kind of go with what Ursula K. Le Guin wrote a long time ago in From Elfland to Poughkeepsie. If you're writing secondary world, your characters should not be speaking 20th century American language. It shouldn't sound like that. It should sound like, appropriate to their, world. So it was easy for me to reject that criticism of being stilted language, but it doesn't do me any good. Still haven't been published yet, but those are some of my experiences, and just wondering what other people have experienced along those lines.
I absolutely want to let others chime in on your experience, Rick, but one of the questions that comes to my mind was that feedback from individual readers, or was it feedback from people who represent particular groups of readers who might have been looking for a particular style?
Well, as I understand it, these magazines have their slush pile readers, and the editors then say, well, it's been rejected, and we're going to give you the favor of letting you know what our slush pile readers said, if that answers your question.
Okay, it does. And I'll add one more thing. I don't know when this became a habit of mine, but if I happen to be looking at a book on Amazon, I will always read the bad reviews first. And it's not because I take them to heart, but forgive me, I'm just going to be blunt about this. I usually find that most people who write negative comments on Amazon about anything are boneheads. So I want to see what the boneheads have to say first, and then I'll read the positive reviews. And if the positive reviews have to do with language and storytelling and use of language, et cetera, then I'm good. So anybody else would like to respond to Rick, please do.
Clara, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. So just heads up, I am having computer issues today. Is my audio okay?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. So I was gonna jump in at Joseph's encouragement with a thought that I had put in the chat, if everybody saw that just a bit ago, where I try to think of rejections not necessarily as something that is completely negative, but I try to take them as, you could say, another notch of experience in my writing belt, that even if I didn't necessarily get an acceptance, it still means that I'm getting my work out there. You know, you have to be submitting, you have to be getting your work out there to get a rejection. So even though a rejection might not necessarily feel great when you get one, it's still, I think, something that you should feel a sense of accomplishment for, that you even got your work out there. That's a step closer to your dream of getting something published or getting a piece in a certain journal. So I know for me personally, I keep track of all of my submissions and I celebrate, okay, I submitted 10 times. I might get 10 rejections, but hey, I submitted 10 times. That's still something. If I get accepted, that's icing on the cake. That's even better. But rejection is an integral part of being a creator, as much as it doesn't always feel good. I think there isn't a single artist, writer, creator, musician out there who hasn't been rejected. And I think it's important to just take it as, well, at least I got my stuff out there. I tried. Time to move on to the next door. Let's knock on the next one and see if that works out.
It's interesting to think about that, Clarabelle, as kind of a computation of the odds, or making it a numbers thing. And the flip side of that is, when I used to have to fly much more frequently for business than I do now, I would always be calculating those odds. Well, I've flown X number of times. I wonder if I'm closer to my number coming up. At any rate, thank you for that. Joseph, you're up, sir.
I got a question for Rick. You said Beneath Ceaseless Skies. That's the Canadian online journal?
I believe it is.
Yeah.
They pay professional rates, and they say they only want secondary worlds. So I thought, hey, what a perfect place for me.
I was curious because I've submitted a few things to them. They've published me a few times. Actually, they serialized one of my novellas, and they asked me one time. I forget the editor in chief. I forgot his name, but he said, "Do you happen to write any poetry?" And I said, "Of course I do." Not a clue, but so okay. I sent them something, and I got the most bizarre response. It was one of those that what? Okay, did you read anything that I wrote? But I then asked a poet laureate friend, could you look at this and tell me what's wrong? Here's I'm being told about it. And they said, no, there's nothing wrong with it. Where would you send it? And I sent it to where they suggested, and boom, it was published. The editor of that journal got back to me and said, where have you been? And I said, in my back room in New Hampshire. But anyway, that's one thing. Rejection being rejection. There's the apocryphal, I love apocryphal stories. There's a story about Harlan Ellison, who to me he's either brilliant or he's an idiot, depending what he's written. But anyway, at the height of his career at a convention, somebody said the only reason you get published is because you're Harlan Ellison. If you weren't Harlan Ellison, people wouldn't be publishing your stuff. So, well, you're an idiot. And they said, tell you what, send something to a magazine where you're regularly published under a pseudonym. Don't use any of your material, any of your name, no identifying you. And he said, okay, you're on. So he sent it in, and the first reader rejected it. This was ridiculous. This is, please, why did you send this to us? Harlan Ellison, being Harlan Ellison, was incensed. He called the editor, who was a friend, and had them fire that first reader because that first reader was an idiot. And I remember being in the audience and hearing this story, and I'm thinking to myself, what a fucking asshole. You can't take rejection, But whatever you may think of Harlan Ellison's work, as I say, it's sometimes brilliant and sometimes not. Now that I am a fiction editor for a journal, I find it very interesting because people who've worked with me in critique groups know I am very strident about what passes the grade with me. And some things, I look at them. Here's one thing I learned a long time ago. If you're going to be an editor, don't waste your time reading the entire thing. If you're not caught by the end of the first page, it's not going to work. And I've had other people say to me, I don't even give them a first paragraph. And still others say, I don't give them a first line. I knew one of the judges for the Booker Prize. And, you have to read how many books? 150, 200 books in a year. I mean, I do that, but I spend a lot of my time reading. That's plus all the other reading she had to do. And she said, yeah, but it's not difficult. I said, why? She said, I can tell by the end of the first line whether this person knows how to write. Can you teach me that? Sure. How much time and money do you have? Okay. But I'm sorry to say, from my perspective as a fiction editor, it is true. I will look at stuff, and if I'm not captured by the end of the first paragraph, and I can tell by the first line, this person knows how to write or they don't. It's not a matter of style. They can be any kind of genre, any kind of style, fiction, nonfiction. They've constructed a good sentence. They know how to use words. They know how to put things together, or they don't. And unless there's a reason that it's not well constructed, the viewpoint character is mentally challenged or something. Okay. But that also becomes very obvious by the rest of the sentence. It's not just, a thing by itself. What I do is at a certain line, I will say, I will get back to the author and I'll let them know, this is close. Here's what you have to do to make it work. And I'm one of 3 editors. I'm the senior fiction editor, but I do pay attention to what other people say. If this doesn't pass here, and I will put a strong vote towards it, here are some other markets you can send it to. Tell them I sent you. That to me is being a good editor. That to me is respecting the author's work, respecting their time. There are people who want to write, God love them, and can't. And, good for you. And there are people who want to write and simply don't know how, but really show a lot of promise. Foster them. So when it comes to rejections from the editor's side, you get inundated. Right now in my queue, I have over 150 manuscripts to read. Most of them aren't going to get past the first sentence. Maybe 10 will go down to the first page. 1 or 2, I'll read the story. And maybe of those 2, I'll get back and say, this one goes in, this one needs a little bit of work, and here's what you need to do. Not, send something else. No, here's what you need to do to make this work. You may disagree with me, but here are my reasons that this needs to happen in this story. And yes or no, it's up to you, but consider what I'm saying to you. Put this together in your own way. And I get a lot of authors who then become friends, and you really helped me out, you really guided me. And I say, can I get 10% of everything you make now? Because I'm a greedy bastard, in case no one knows. So that's it. And let me see if I can lower my hand.
Yes. And I have a question. I know the value of a good story well written. I'll put it that way. If we judge someone's work from a first sentence or a first paragraph, whatever the cutoff might be, are we giving ourselves a meaningful sense of whether that person has a decent story to tell?
You want me to answer that?
Please, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want to know why I say yes?
I would love to know why. Would you like to tell me why?
Um, it comes down to being able to recognize a well-constructed sentence. And that well-constructed sentence must also give an indication, it's first story in the first sentence in the story, must also reveal to the reader something's going to happen. Something's going to happen to the characters of the place or the event. Something's going to happen here, which is going to be very interesting to you as a reader. Even if it's a nonfiction piece, a journalistic piece, something in the newspaper, who, what, when, where, why, and how. Put it up there right off. So the reader knows immediately what's going to happen, what this is about, what the story will be about. I spent some time writing newspaper material, newspaper columns and articles and stuff. And I thought it was one of the best foundations I could have had. I'm not saying that my writing is excellent. Everyone should chime in and say, yes, it is. But the statement is, it's a great foundation because you know how to be concise. You can, the second that you have conveyed to the reader, this is worth your time. And as an editor, I got 150, 200 manuscripts to read. You better catch me real quick. And sometimes I will recognize that story, that line really sucked, but line 2 is really good. What's going on here? And I have gotten back to authors and said, this first paragraph needs to be gone. Just take it out of the story. It's worthless. And when I've been editing books, your opening chapter really belongs somewhere around chapter 7. But the writing, the quality of the writing, to me, is the first indication this person knows what they're doing or has the ability to learn how to do it better. So that's me. That's,
Okay.
And as we all know, I'm an asshole. So,
well, I was about to say understood until you got to the asshole part. I don't know that I want to accept that. But anyway, thank you very much. And Donna, what would you like to share with us?
I first of all want to answer Rick, applying my vast experience of being rejected. I think that you sort of started in the middle of the procedure. Usually I got rejections that didn't give me any response at all. So what you have been getting is editors who want to see more of your work, just not what you sent them. And what their responses mean, and what it sounds like to me, is they never spent nearly as much time justifying their rejection with whatever they said as you spent writing it. So I would take what they said with a grain of salt and do what you think is right for your work. Sometimes what they hit upon will strike you as correct, and that's what I would act on. But the rest I would just dismiss and send them something else later.
Well, thank you for saying that. Appreciate it.
I also, at some point, it doesn't have to be right away, have some experiences I'd like to share.
Well, considering that you have the floor, I think you ought to just go for it.
All right, thank you. I did have a compliment that I was good at rejection, and as you said, Mark, I did determine that it was not personal. And some of the reason I came to that conclusion was I wasn't putting the right material in the right hands. And when that finally happened, it worked. And, there were lots of reasons that they may have rejected it because it was not what they wanted or what they bought last week, or, they've changed direction, or it's just crap. So, You don't know. The comparison I want to make is with Amazon. I'm sort of studying up on Amazon ads right now. Rick, Dave Chesson, Chesson. I'm doing his little course on it to freshen myself. And the first thing he said is that Amazon is all about relevance. And they want the material that they show buyers to be relevant with what they asked for. So you have to do your categories and keywords to show that your work is relevant to the purchaser. And if if they reject it, it's just the wrong thing for them. In other words, it's business. The other thing I wanted to describe was college applications. My husband years ago did college guidance for some athletes at his school where he taught. So we toured colleges every spring vacation, and he interviewed the admissions people. And what he learned was that they knew their students, they knew what students they could help, and they knew which certain students were not a right fit. So they were basically looking for relevance too. And it was business. That's the way it works. And that's how I look at what I do and what I send out. You know, I have to put the right thing in the right hands.
Thank you, Donna. Actually, you've prompted at least one other question in my mind, but I'm going to hold it because I would like folks with their hands up to be able to participate. So, Ken, you're up, my friend.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple things. I think they're connected, at least somewhere in association in my brain. The first one is, if your work is always being accepted, you're in trouble. Why?
Ooh.
Because you're not pushing boundaries. And so what's the point of your writing? Once you're in that groove and everybody says, oh, it's wonderful, you've stopped growing. That's the first thing. The second, and I think this is connected, it has not to do with my work, but my wife's. My wife is a painter. And if you go to my website, you can even find her paintings. And she's pretty good. I mean, she showed in Paris, she showed in Copenhagen, she showed in New York, she showed in Washington, D.C., up in the Boston area. I mean, you know, pretty decent. And so I would go with her to, in those days, you had to actually go to a gallery, you know, none of this stuff online. You actually went to the door with a book of slides and they looked at it or not. So we went into this one gallery in Soho, and the lady whose job it was to kind of man the door looked at the book of slides that Roz had given. Said, wow, these are pretty good. I'm going to show them to the owner. The owner was over on the other side of the room with a bunch of art agents. And she came back and she said, well, you know, the owner and his friends said this work is really very good, but none of it is saleable. Now, the thing is that the book that we had given her were all paintings that had been bought by unimportant people like Paul Newman, Billy Joel. Seriously, okay. These idiots are telling us your stuff isn't saleable. So that's the other thing. Remember, people have their own little blinder, and often their blinder is about how they're going to succeed. And I can imagine these people gathered around the owner saying, well, no, you got to look at my client's side. Don't look at this woman, look at my. And I think there's a lot of what rejection is that. So don't take it personally. Just, you know, keep growing, keep going. And who knows, maybe one day Billy Joel or somebody walk in the gallery, as he did with her, say, wow, I want that painting. Or I want that poem or that play or that story. Good luck, folks.
Thank you, Ken. Nick, we're glad you're here. And you're on mute, sir.
Well, I hope you will be. I'm a bit of an interloper, as I've written lots of articles, and I've written about 4 poems, and I've never had one formally published anywhere because I haven't thought it. But I have thought about this. And I was thinking when you were talking, Rick, you know, if you think about, you were talking about Ulysses. Ulysses is, as far as I know, is pretty much unreadable by anybody who, unless they're prepared to spend 5 years actually reading it. And now there was absolutely no way it would get through the normal filters, because people would not be. You can't make sense of it unless you heavily invest your time. Now, if James Joyce had actually been listening to the people who first saw that piece of work, which is now seen as a classic, it would never have been published. Never. So it would have been lost forever. So I think, I can only speak for me and my limited experience, really, but I think that the important thing is, am I writing something from my heart? You know, am I producing something that's real to me? Does it mean something? And then that's the first thought that occurs to me, or second thought. The third thing is, we live in a world now where you don't have to wait for somebody else to publish stuff. If you want to publish stuff, you have my, you know, I say to people because I'm a coach, I say to people, well, you know, you have my permission, bloody well publish it. You certainly get it out to more people than if you sit in your office waiting for somebody else to like it on an arbitrary basis, so they will actually publish it through their channels. If it's good and you think it's good, send a copy to some friends, see what they think. You know, share it, get their opinion. Surely. Because has anybody here not got something that's they think people outside this group need to learn, or could gain from the material that you're producing? Anybody think it's completely useless? Hands up. I don't see many people having their hands up. So you all think it's good stuff. Anyway, that's my 9 penneth, and I'll shut up.
Thank you, Nick. 2 things. One, I don't know if you got a copy of the bylaws that Joseph created for this group, but there's a no interlopers clause in there, which means that nobody's an interloper. The other thing I wanted to share with you is something that James Joyce wrote to Bennett Cerf in a letter about Ulysses, and he wrote, "I put in so many enigmas and puzzles that it'll keep the professors busy for centuries arguing over what I meant, and that's the only way of ensuring one's immortality."
That's rather beautiful, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
He's a clever man. He knew what he was doing.
Yeah, and that, among other things, tells me that he was the quintessential Irish wise ass.
But he was winding up the establishment, wasn't he?
Yes,
winding
he was.
up the literary establishment by breaking absolutely all the rules that there were.
Yeah, he was very good at that.
And then getting people to interpret it and make meaning out of it.
And buy his work.
Hmm.
Brooke, welcome. Thank you for being here. And by the way, just like Nick, you're not an interloper.
Be here and already got so much out of everybody who shared. Thank you.
I think you might be having some issues with your audio.
Thought it usually gets better. Is it better now?
Yes, it is.
Okay, something happening with my headphones. I can hear, but nobody can hear me. Well, a couple of thoughts as you started, Mark, as soon as I hear rejection, what I always remember is reading the book of Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, Like Starbucks or Not. What I really stayed with me from one of his books, I think it was called Pour Your Heart Into It, is the number of times he gets rejected as he's looking for money to start this business. And I was thinking at the top of my mind, like, wow, you get two, I will just get the number wrong, but it's something like 200 plus rejections you get, but you believe so much that you keep going on and on and on. I said, like, yeah, keep that. That's like an entrepreneur's point of view, but I think it applies to everything that we talk here as we get rejected. And then the second thought that I had, just coming back to what you, Nick, just what you have shared, is like, okay, how do I get around rejection? I just self-publish. That's what I did with my first book. And it wasn't about like, oh, let me become a very wonderful author or something. I had too much to share, just like to your point again, Nick. I am learning all this stuff because I moved to United States 25 years ago. There's a whole new perspective, different way to live, different way to think. I have to write these down. So I was writing forever when there was no blogs, but then I put them together in a book, self-published. I'm grateful for the people who read it and also grateful for those who didn't like it or don't want to read it, but I just had to put it out there. But it also made me think after that I had a book written with some of my co-workers and that became a bestseller. But how? Because we put money into it. We found a good publisher for it. And it was mostly like, I think, Donna, you were talking, Amazon was thinking now that's a very hot topic that they want to publish. So there's so many factors in this being rejected and I'm also rejected too many times with some articles that I want to get published in New York Times or in our local paper because I feel like as an immigrant, I'm bringing some different perspective what's happening in the world at the time, but I don't think they either care or now that I'm learning from editors in this on my screen, oh, my first sentence wasn't right, or my first paragraph wasn't right, or I'm also a second language English speaker, obviously. So what do you do? So you have something to say, you feel like you have a great message to come across so that people learn. But then, am I a good writer? I don't know, maybe not. But that also brings up the question nowadays. And most people say, okay, put that in AI, Brooke, so that you don't have to have an editor for everything that you write. And then I look at those when I'm doing some workshops, coming up with titles for my articles. I feel like, yeah, it's using better language than I can ever learn on my own. So should I use it or not? That's where I am. That's why I put it in the chat. So as an editor, first of all, do you feel like people can make use of AI editors? And if yes or no. And the other thing is like, can you sense it? Does it feel better or worse? Especially now that I'm thinking, oh, my first sentence, maybe it's not the best sentence, but I always write nonfiction. So is it also the same with fiction and nonfiction? So lots of thoughts around that, obviously, at the times that we're living now, but also coming from a point of view of a second language English speaker. What do you do when you have so much that you want to share? So I don't care when I put it on LinkedIn, people know me by now. So if I'm not using the best language or grammar, maybe, but when you're writing a book or an important article that you want to send out to a newspaper, of course, it has to have the best grammar, best English possible, without using my own voice, though. When I wanted my English book to be published into Turkish, and somebody did the translation, they lost my voice. It wasn't sounding like me, and I don't like that either. If AI changes my personality in what I write, I don't like that either. So anyways, lots of things out there, and I don't expect every one of them to be answered, but those were my thoughts that I put in the chat. Thank you, Joseph, for saying, yeah, say that out loud.
I would just like to respond if I could. The first thing that came to my mind, Brooke, was when I have the opportunity to go to generally elementary schools with the books that I've written for children, kids usually ask the same question. Well, how do you know if anybody's going to like what you've written? And the answer is you don't. And so one of the other things that occurs to my mind is, or that comes to my mind is, and I guess it's kind of a spin on Clarabelle's numbers thing. There's no way in the world I can be the only person on the planet who thinks the way I do. That's not possible. So it's a matter, I think, of perseverance and being able to get stuff out there. And I'm positive probably everybody on this call is more knowledgeable about AI and using AI as an editor than I am. But it strikes me as being something akin to Grammarly. And thinking about that always reminds me of the line from the Woody Allen movie Stardust Memories about he's recalling his mother running the boiled chicken through the deflavorizer, and after that happens, it's just I don't it's tasteless. It's stylistically indistinguishable. I guess that's the way I would put it. So for whatever that's worth. And Joseph, you're up next. I don't know if you have anything in response to what Brooke was saying.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Actually, the thing about AI, and this goes back to something, another meeting Mark and I were involved in. I hope you remember it, Mark. You presented something which was written by AI and asked people what they thought of it.
Yeah, I remember.
And everyone was like, yeah, that's interesting. Okay. And I went, no, it sucks. And the thing was, I didn't recognize that it was necessarily written by AI, but I did recognize that the structure, the content, the language, blah, 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 was basically at a low-level sophomore high school writing level. It was, and I think I even said, no, I'd reject this. I don't even think I'd comment on it because it was so poorly done. Just about everything I've seen by AI, and most magazines now have a big caveat right up front. Don't send us something that's been AI'd. We won't take it. The thing is, AI neutralizes, it deflavorizes.
Yeah.
It totally removes your voice from your writing. And believe it or not, even after what I've said is, the first sentence, by the way, you write a strong lead, strong opening, doesn't matter if it's fiction or nonfiction, the editor will look at it. That's all you need is a good, strong lead. And we can talk about that offline if you'd like. Because we have a lot of editors on this call. So, be scared, be afraid, very, very afraid. The thing is, whatever AI produces is not you, and it's your voice. When it comes down to it, the editor will begin, you send enough stuff to an editor, they begin to recognize your voice. And that is your brand. Your voice as a creator, whether it's painting, dance, whatever else, that is your brand. Not that you write, in my case, science fiction, fantasy, horror, children's stories, Mark, children's stories, humor, whatever. Donna no longer writes cozies, but whatever. I apologize. That is your brand, your voice. The ability for a reader to go, I know that. That sounds real familiar. I've read this guy's stuff before. And I've had readers tell me that my genre is Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
They said, it doesn't matter what you've written. I can tell that you wrote it. That is tremendous for branding, shit for marketing. Because I can't get a publisher to go, well, yes, we'll make a Joseph shelf in a bookstore or on Amazon. What's really sad is Stephen King. Yeah, he's got a shelf, wherever. He's got a this, he's got a that. And that brings us back to the thing about Rejections. Stephen King was going to give up writing. And his wife saw that he had thrown Carrie in the trash, and she said, "No, send that in. No, it sucks. It's no good. Come on, please send it in." "Yes, ma'am." He, like me, just went, "Yes, of course." And that was his breakthrough novel. That was the one that put him over the top. So it doesn't, you may think something is really crap. Find the audience that thinks it's gold.
Mm.
Look at the stuff that's on TV these days. I mean, honest to God, would you sit through that? Maybe you do. We don't. We're kind of like, oh, God, I can tell the plot points and I can tell you the time they're going to show up. So, no. But I do recommend a lot of British murder mysteries. Those are well plotted, well written. So the question of AI, maybe you can use AI to recognize recurring things you do that need to be changed. However, don't rely on AI to write for you. It'll rob you of what makes Brooke in her writing. I'll be quiet now.
Actually, I want to just pick up on what you were saying, Joseph, and relate it to something that Nick was saying. Nick, you were talking about writing from your heart. For my money, I think an identifiable voice shows soul, and if the work has no soul, no, not so much. And that's what AI produces. I mean, it's an amalgamation. That's what AI is. So, realistically, what do you expect? And Ken, what do you expect?
Oh, I expect all kinds of things. But I wanted to go back to Nick's comments. But before I do, Don, I have to tell you, because it sounded so dismissive, I love a good cozy. So I'm going to have to check your work out. Which actually brings me back to what Nick was saying. Okay, let's assume for the moment that Ulysses was self-published on Kindle or KDP. Okay, how many people would read it? What would happen to it? Would it become a great standard of the genre, of the canon? Of course not. Nobody. Right? We need the Bennett Cerfs. Okay? We need the Branch Rickies. And I'm, thinking here now, who integrated baseball? You need to have somebody willing to do it. You have all these great players, but until Branch Rickey says, "Hey, I'm bringing this guy Jackie Robinson up, and you guys deal with it," and he changes baseball for much the better. Even Theo Van Gogh, by representing his brother, absolutely, and keeping him alive, basically, paying his bills, becomes an essential, and we're losing that. And that's the real price. That is the real price of AI. Yes, I agree with everything you guys are saying. It's like bad marshmallow fluff. It's like my mother's cooking. My mother studied with Woody Allen's mother. But worse than that is it's taking away that search and the finding of those taste leaders, the people who actually do have the taste. And how do we, a small band of brothers and sisters, how do we help that process of bringing people to awareness? One of my good friends is a fellow named Paul Mosier. I don't know if any of you know Paul. He writes young adult fiction, and he's incredibly good. And when he was first starting out, he was sent to me, and somebody said, "Ken, would you, take him to your publisher?" And I read his stuff, and I said, "Hell no, my publisher isn't good enough for him. He's better than that. And, he ended up with one of the big houses, which has made a big difference in his career. I don't know about you. How do we find those places that can make the difference? And how do we get them to really help shape, to be the gatekeepers? Because otherwise, we're going to have an AI world, whether we want it or not.
I don't know the answer to your question, which was, is that the price of AI? I would add to that. Is that also the price of self-publishing? Because I have to believe that commercial publishing houses have less to choose from, and maybe even need to be more discriminating. I'm not sure. Joseph, please go ahead. I suspect you could have much more to say about that than I do.
Well, I wanted to, Brooke put something in the chat, and it's an important piece, because in the world of writing, in the world of any creative endeavor, one of the things I learned, and which I do not excel at, is networking. So, I was really blessed that I had a magnificent mentor in the world of writing, AJ Budrus. The man's a god. That's it. He's passed away. I will miss him forever. And I always, in my dedications to every one of my books, AJ Budrus. In my trade technical books, I have an entire chapter dedicated to AJ Budrus. To which one of the reviewers said, "You can feel the love dripping off the page." Good, I did my job. But specifically, Brooke, you're in this call. You are talking with authors and editors and writers. Make use of the network. I know who you are now. I know I've listened to your heart, so to speak. And I say this to everyone. I've listened to your heart. I hear the power, the energy, the vibrancy. One of the things I've picked from this, which I could not pick just from a page if you sent it to me, is, okay, you're sincere. You have an interest. You're driven. You want to do this. It's important to you. Send me something. And because I know you personally, not tremendously personally, but because I've interacted with you, yeah, I will comment on it. If I don't think it's good enough, I will tell you why. If I can't get past your first sentence, I will tell you why, and I'll tell you how to fix it. You can go, "You're a schmuck, Joseph. You don't know shit." Or, "Wow, this guy's good." Or, but that's the point. I used to have a really good network. Then I will use this phrase, I was blacklisted by the community I was writing in because I spoke truth to power. And Mark will go, "Really, Joseph, you did? I'm shocked." I did. There was a God in the field, and I said, that person's a belligerent ass. And they're nasty, and they're vindictive, and they're cruel. And unfortunately, all the editors at the time went, "Oh, how could you, bad guy?" And I went, "Yeah, okay, well, I'm going to do something else for the next 25 years, which I did. Came back. Now my books are getting published. So, and my stories, my short stories and stuff, I think I've had 10, 11, 12 things published this year. Now, part of that is, yeah, I work really hard at my craft. Part of it also is I don't give up. I'm either really stupid or, whatever, steadfast, maybe, stubborn. Don't give up. You will find an audience. You will find a market. My editor, who I've been working with for going on 20 years, she said to me, "You don't have to worry about finding the ones who don't want your work. You have to worry about finding the one who does." Mm-hmm. And I went, "Wow, that's really good." And she said, "That's why I'm in the business." So, that's it. Find people who will help you. Find people who will encourage you. Find people who will be honest with you. Get into a critique group. If you're writing fiction or nonfiction, get into a critique group with people who will comment on the work, not on you. And if I'm embarrassing you, I apologize. But can you tell that this is important to me, to getting people to get their word out? You know, people on this call and elsewhere have heard me say many times, if we do not put our words out there, they will be lost for all time. And that is a crime against the universe. I can't describe to you how much that pains me, to think that our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions will be lost through time. So write. I'm quiet now.
Um, thank you, Joseph. Before we move on, in fairness to Tammy, I want to share, and a couple of you people in the group may know this, but I'll just share this anyway. This past Sunday night, as a gift from my wife, I was able to go and write for 3 hours in Mark Twain's library in Hartford, which was just astounding. And I had been working on something, and a great deal happened to that something while I was in the library. And I shared it with Tammy, and Tammy sent me her feedback today. And Tammy was brilliantly honest with me, and is causing me to think, as Faulkner put it, that there are some darlings I'm probably going to have to kill in there. And that is exactly as it should be. So, Tammy, thank you. I wasn't going to let this meeting pass without thanking you. So I worked it in there. Thank you. Rick.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments. All I can say about AI is that for me, and I'm assuming it's for everybody on here, I write because I have to. I have to write.
Yeah.
For a long time, I didn't write, although I plotted my novel for decades, but I wasn't writing. And when I finally get back to writing my novel, I loved it. And then when I began writing short stories, when I think about it, in 2022, I wrote 2 short stories based on the characters of my novel. And I thought that was the best thing I did all that year. Even though, I'm a practicing lawyer and having some success in my daytime job, but the best thing I did that year was wrote 2 short stories that I really liked. I really liked them. I haven't got them published yet, but I'm so happy I wrote them, and I wrote them. AI didn't write them, and I don't think you can get that satisfaction if you were to rely on AI at all. So, I mean, for grammar, for punctuation, things like that, but for the content, it has to come from your heart, and that's the most satisfying thing you're ever gonna have. Now, we all want to get published, and I'll be honest, I like to be published too, but I made a decision. I'm not chasing a market. I'm writing what I like, because that's the only thing I really know how to do, write what I like, not to chase the market. I know it's fashionable in the field of fantasy. I won't say what it is, but I know what it is. I don't want to offend anybody, but I don't want to put that in my stories because that's not me. And then the last comment I would make is because someone said, let's talk about acceptance. Well, yeah, last year I did get accepted. Um, and wouldn't you know it, when I submitted that story to the rabbit hole, I thought, no way in the world, no way in the world. And I totally forgot about it. And a few months later, I get this email, and the first word is congratulations. I thought, well, wait a minute. Usually the first word is thank you, which means thank you, but no thank you. Here's the first word is congratulations. Hey, we like it. We want to publish it. So finding the right market. It was a weird piece of flash fiction. And Rabbit Hole says they wanted weird. And in explaining the true story behind the nursery rhyme Rub-a-dub-dub, 3 men in a tub was weird enough for them, and so it worked.
Wow. Nicely done. Thank you. Nick, you're up again, sir. You're also on mute again.
Just noticed that 2 people So I don't know your name. Only MT Jew. You haven't spoken at all yet. I just wondered whether I should defer actually and give you a space. Let you have a space. You're okay. Okay. Well, two things. I'd like to share a success, a small one, because it was an interesting story, and also I have a thought about how you building these connections between the editors and the authors. But my story is a slightly strange one. A long time ago, I went to a workshop which was actually had in it a whole series of little workshops. It wasn't all about writing, but one of them was a poetry writing workshop. And I've never written anything really before. But the guy who was running it said, let's be clear about poetic writing. It doesn't have to rhyme. It doesn't have to scan. It just has to mean something to you. Mm. So that was the first thing. And the second thing was even more powerful. He said, when you've written, there will be no evaluation. In fact, we will practice saying, So we practice saying, Now, when you're actually free from that feeling of being judged, then the creativity just gets unleashed. So I actually wrote something about my experience of this incredibly interesting and stimulating workshop. I wrote a short poem called Love is on the Way. Mm. And much to my complete flabbergastation, if that's a word, when they wrote up what had happened at the workshop, my poem was actually on the front page, summarizing what had happened. So I think it was just that feeling of not knowing that you're not going to be judged to actually just unlock it. In fact, I remember I wrote it once and I changed one word. That was all. Wrote it straight and then changed one word. So that's a really interesting story. And the same thing, I think I've taught influencing skills a lot because I'm a coach and a consultant. And one simple way of looking at it, if you want to influence somebody, is to think about two circles which overlap. So let's say Joseph is an editor. So Joseph has his interests and for instance, would want to support this particular sort of writing. You want to write. Find out where those two circles overlap, where what the editor wants to publish what you're writing. But you can really only do that when you have a connection with the person, because you can only do it if you actually find out, if you actually know enough about the person to know what they need. And the simplest way to do that is to ask, what are you looking for first? So that's a very long speech, and I should shut up.
I want to share a parallel experience, I think, Nick. I was at a trade show once at which some of my clients were exhibiting. And I went over to see one of my clients, and he said, Mark, come here. I need to introduce you to the guy in the booth next to me. So I went with him, and he took me over there, and he said, so-and-so, I don't remember the gentleman's name. I want you to meet Mark O'Brien. He's the best salesman I've ever known. And I was absolutely crushed to the point that I had difficulty sleeping that night in my hotel room. So I went back to see my client the next day, and I said, I really don't want you to find me ungrateful, but you told this guy that I was the best salesman that you've ever known. Do you think I'm a huckster or like a snake oil salesman or something? And he started laughing. And he said, no. He said, I don't think you realize that when you talk about something that you're passionately interested in and knowledgeable about, you're really, really compelling. And I thought, wow, No, I don't realize that. And I felt instantly relieved because the guy didn't think I was hawking snake oil. So I applied that to writing too, Nick, and to what you were saying. If the notion of being judged for what we do is not part of the equation, we're pretty free, it seems to me, and free to be sincere and genuine.
May I add something about acceptance
Yeah, please do.
and being patient? I wrote a story in the late 1980s called Morning Song. It was based on a Huron myth, Huron legend. Couldn't get it, so couldn't. I went from the paying markets to the we'll pay you in copies to if you're lucky, we'll put your name on the magazine, on the masthead. Nobody was interested. Nobody wanted it. Kept on sending it out. Sent it to a publisher in Great Britain, and never heard back. Well, okay, that was an interesting flop. Got an email back, and the email started out with, "We had to pass the story around the office because we were all in tears." And I'm thinking, did it suck that bad? They were blown away. They couldn't get over it. They were amazed. And I went, yes, well, you should be, because it's an amazing story. Send me a check because I'm greedy. But the fact of the matter was that, from the 1980s to 2018, nobody could give a crap about this story. I found the one market who wanted it. And they were a paying market, even more incredible. But they were not a US market. They did not deal in mythologies. They didn't deal in legends. They just thought it was an amazing story. Okay, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And he's telling me about everybody in the office who they were literally passing it around. They printed it out and were passing it around. And a couple of weeks goes by. Do you happen to have anything else you've written? And I got published in every book, every magazine, every anthology they did until, I don't know, 2 years ago. The reason I stopped writing for them was I moved on from what they were interested in. I wrote a story which the publisher thought was brilliant, but she was not going to publish it. And this is not why I stopped writing for them. But again, it's a recognizing who you're writing for and the audience they're supporting. The story dealt with someone having an abortion. She, the publisher, had done everything they could. She and her husband had done everything they could to have children, were totally incapable of having children. It had been a fiasco and had damaged her beyond anything. And she said, I can't publish that kind of story. It's got too many issues for me. I said, but, being told that, oh, okay, so I don't send you any more stories along those lines. It's that type of thing. Don't give up. If you think a story is worth it, don't give up. That gets into self-publishing. And I will say that back when I got back into the publishing world, or the writing world full time, in 2016, the majority of stuff that was self-published sucked. It did. It was poorly written, poorly constructed. The books were crap. They were not laid out well. People thought, yeah, I can write. They didn't bother with an editor. They didn't bother with graphics, anything like that. Format. Nowadays, it's like the gold rush. Most of the people have left because they couldn't find any gold in the rivers. Now the people who are left are the ones who either said, well, there may not be any gold, but I could start a store and sell things to the people who want to pan for gold. It's starting to play out, much like there used to be an awful lot of publishers. Now there's not. So give it time. If you believe you have something worth sharing, they made that the lead the lead poem on their journal. Congratulations. That's a big thing. You should be proud. If I were you, I would put that up on wallpaper in Grand Central Station, but I have an ego. So that's it.
If nobody has any comments on that, I actually want to pick up on something Joseph was just saying and connect it to a question that Donna prompted earlier. Those of you who have happened to see my LinkedIn profile, you'll see that it claims that I'm a master of contextual authenticity, which I actually put on there as the result of a dare from someone in another Zoom conversation. But I wonder if being able to write for different audiences, different publications, whatever that the case may be, if that isn't something like an issue of contextual authenticity. And I also wonder if in being able to write for, let's just say, different publications, does that require a modification of something we were referring to earlier as voice? And that's a sincere question. I don't know the answer to that. I would love to hear from folks who have done it. Joseph, Donna, whomever.
Hi. I've said before that my voice is my product, and I don't write nonfiction anymore. That would be what I would have slanted to the customer. But no, I'm, being true to my voice is my main goal, probably.
Joseph, I take it you share that thought?
Yeah, very much so. A lot of people have said that they write what they want to write. Yes, I'm guilty of that. I've also stated publicly I write autobiography. Everything that I write is based on experiences I've had, stuff that's happened in my life. And it does produce a certain quality. You can't just vomit on a page. You have to have craft to make it worth reading. And that noted, I used to write trade technicals. I wrote for industry magazines. I, published in scientific journals and all that kind of crap. And all of that writing, one of the things I used to say back when I was in my 20s, any writing I do will help all the writing I do. When I write a technical scene in a story now or a novel, I have people in that field say, wow, you really nailed it. Where did you study? I didn't. Yes, you did. Come on. Where'd you say? It's like in The Augmented Man. Where did you go? You studied Black Ops. You were in Black Ops. No, no. Where'd you learn to fly a helicopter? I got this from Amazon. They said something from Amazon. I studied. It's one of those things. Use all of your experience to create your writing. And I'm going to pick on Donna again. Your latest series of books are breathtaking. They still have your voice. They're you. I read those books and I go, yeah, okay. She's telling me the story. Yep. Okay. Yep. I hear her talking when I'm reading her work. And it's glorious,
Thank you.
Oh, come on. I'm one of your fans,
I'm honored to be one of your fans, and I thank you for that. Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure. Find her books on Amazon, please, everyone. It's writing is writing. And if you write well, you can write any kind of stuff. You can write any kind of material well. And what's really impressive is your voice will come through no matter what you're writing. You know, I was writing trade technical, and the editors were saying, this is some of the most poetic technical information we've ever read. They were not, I remember one editor said to his team, this is, Joseph is not writing a book like we're used to. This is not a 1, 2, 3 book. And readers, this was back when readers actually sent you letters in the mail. Readers were getting back in touch with me and saying, boy, this is wonderful. This is like sitting down with you in your living room and having a cup of coffee. The way you explain programming, the way you explain computer mechanisms, the way you explain, you know, neurophysics. I'm like, well, thank you. That was my goal. You know, the way you explain mathematics is just, wow, how come I couldn't find this in college? Don't worry about it. I couldn't either, you know. So find the audience, it'll be there.
Appreciate that. Ken, you may have the opportunity to take us home, sir.
Okay, let's go home. I just have this strange thing about voice, and I want to, you know, which is in each piece I write, fiction, nonfiction, theater, poetry, okay, there's a different voice. The narrator, I create the narrator, and then the narrator takes over the voice. And it's really weird. I know people say, well, yeah, I can tell it's yours, Ken. But it really does change. And I guess what I'm saying is that one of the things that makes us creative is that we do have those voices in our head. And before we can ask the world to accept us, we really have to accept those voices. And I think one of the biggest turning points in my life as a writer, but also as a human being, was the day that I stopped trying to quiet the voices and started celebrating them and welcoming them. And I come on this discussion group once a month, and, you know, you guys are becoming voices in my head. So I just want to say that's a good thing. And I hope we are becoming voices for other people. As we listen to a world, as we allow that world to speak to us, as we stop filtering it out, as we stop judging what the voice is trying to tell us, which is, I think, what that poetry seminar or workshop helped teach you, Nick. As we stop doing that, and as we allow the voices, as we accept those voices, then hopefully the world will also accept ours. How's that for a note?
Wow. Wow. I'm just glad I don't have to follow you. So we are coming to the end of our time. I'm going to leave it to Joseph to wrap this up. But before that, I just want to say thank you to everyone who was here. Especially thank you to the people who were here for the first time. I hope you'll come back. I'm sorry Brooke left before she could hear me say that, but I can reach out to her. And I'm going to echo what Ken just said. I learn from every one of these sessions. I derive value from it. One way or the other, it influences what I'm writing. So thanks to all of you.
Let me further that thanks. Once again, you know, these are wonderful sessions. I find them invaluable. I apologize if I dominate them. I do not wish to. But I'm an egotist, so there you go. Thank you all. Please reach out to each other on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Andy Warhol, whatever. And thank you, audience and listeners. Have a great time. See you all next month, I hope.
I will add one more thing, if I may, which is, if any of you derive anything of value from this and you know other people who might, please make them aware of it and please invite them.
Yes. Thank you for watching Roundtable 360, where creatives from diverse fields and across the globe gather to discuss what's relevant, irrelevant, serious, and fun. Roundtable 360 is brought to you by Biz Catalyst 360 and Northern Lights Publishing. Our shows are taped the last Thursday of every month at 7:30 a.m. Hawaiian time, 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, 6:30 p.m. London time, 19 hours 30 minutes Central European Standard Time, and whatever time that converts to, wherever you are. Please join us at http://nlb.pub/roundtable. That address is on your screen. See you next time, and until then, stay well and safe.